I have been tasked with creating a realistic looking 2-year-old. So that means that it is a fake person that does not really exist, often created with different components of photos that were loaded into the program to create a fake person. This particular tactic is definitely a first for SOSA. Never did I think I'd be retouching an AI photo of a baby. Incoming.
Accepting.
Do you want to make any phone calls before I take you to the jail?
Probably my wife.
And speaker.
What should I say?
That's totally up to you.
I'm gonna be out for the night. I'll give you more details in the morning.
Okay, what happened? What's happening?
Don't worry about it. I'll tell you everything in the morning. Just, I'll talk to you in the morning.
You okay?
Yeah.
Okay, because I'm kind of worried.
Don't be worried.
I don't know. I'm worried. What's happening? There's another person there.
Hi, it's Investigator Brian Dawson with the Canadian County Sheriff's Office. Your husband showed up tonight to pick up a 12-year-old girl to take her on a quote-unquote camping trip that he's been communicating with on social media apps.
Wait, what?
Can you tell me where he was supposed to be tonight?
I don't know. He said he was going on a drive.
On a drive?
Oh my god.
The unidentified fluid in the Idaho murders leaking outside the house.
There's been some comments back and forth about how did it go 2 stories down. People have been calling it blood. As an investigator, we don't identify substances just by looking at them. We call them suspected. In this case, suspected blood. Till it is collected, sent to a lab, we're not going to call it blood. We're going to call it suspected blood or a red substance. I'm going to show you where these stains were and how far they traveled. So I'm going to zoom in here, and this is the area right here where those are. So this area right here is where I was talking about the bedroom with Zaina and where Ethan was probably staying. You can see it's not very far from the ground. I mean, the ground level is right here, and this is the bottom. It is kind of particular that this pattern of red fluid is going down in this direction here. In this little section here, it looks like the fluid possibly came over the top because the next staining pattern is down below that appears to be the same texture and consistency of that.
In prison, I lived with a serial killer for 6 months before I ever knew he was a serial killer. So back in 2004, I was at Nottoway Correctional Center, and I'd gotten a job in the woodshop. So they were moving me to the woodshop workers pod. Remember, they popped the door to the cell for me to go in, and there was this little old man sitting in front of his TV drinking coffee, and I was like, bet, like, this is a roommate I can deal with. He's not young and crazy. He's not going to be loud. Like, and it worked out great. Sometimes he worked night shift, and I worked day shift, so I got the cell to myself. He was quiet. You know, we had good conversations. We watched Jeopardy. I really liked the guy. He even taught me how to shave, because when I first got locked up, I couldn't grow a beard, so I never learned. And I felt so bad for him because he never got mail and never, talked on the phone, that I asked my stepmom if she would write him, because she had lived in Japan and he had been stationed in Japan. And then my stepmom comes for a visit, and she's like, Jesse, your roommate's a serial killer. And I was like, okay. So she tells me this whole story, and I go back and I have to have this conversation. Like, Greg, remember how I said I was going to try to get my stepmom to write you? Well, she doesn't really feel comfortable. And he says, yeah, you did your homework. And he laughed and scared the shit out of me. Greg was my prison roommate who was connected to a dozen murders across the country, but I didn't know that at first. So finding out one day that I was living with a serial killer was uncomfortable, and it didn't really mesh with the things I knew about him. He'd been a decorated officer in Vietnam, he'd served 3 tours, and used to recite the names of every soldier he had lost. The man was helping me work on my vocabulary. We used to play Jeopardy at night. Hell, he's the one who taught me how to shave because I hadn't been able to grow a beard before prison. He was really where I started to understand that no one is just one thing.
Ah!
Oh my God!
Christ!
What?
You found him? Oh. Literally him.
Holy crap!
He's a child welfare specialist.
He works for the Oklahoma Department of Human Services.
It literally says, report suspected child abuse.
Wow.
The park ranger being a child welfare specialist is worst case scenario. We entrust these people to take care of our society's most vulnerable. And instead, he's taking advantage of them and he's exploiting them.
Hello?
Hi, Major Flowers. In the context of Oklahoma, what does a child welfare specialist do?
They're the ones that like Child Protective Services. They're the ones that remove kids out of homes that are being abused and beaten and sexually abused and neglected. They're the ones that put the kids in state custody. In Oklahoma, that's what CPS is. It's Oklahoma Department of Human Services.
Okay.
He's around kids all the time. They're supposed to be there to protect kids.
It's like the worst job he could have.
Yeah. I will not breathe easily until he's in custody. I'm proud of the team, I'm proud of the work that we do, but none of that matters until he's in custody.
TikTokers Who Did Terrible Things, Episode 5. Claire Miller, otherwise known as Spirits and Consulting. Creator class type, peculiar. Specialty, all things musically. Claim to fame, extremely disturbing. Well, prior to February of 2021, Claire had really just been using TikTok as a means to escape her life at home. And from lip syncing in front of a mirror to these quirky little dance moves, her account just really sort of blended in with a lot of the others during that time. And then it was like all of a sudden her content just started showing up on everybody's For You page. And one by one, as we clicked on that comment section, we would all come across one of TikTok's darkest and most disturbing stories still to this day. You see, Claire had a sister named Helen. She had cerebral palsy and was wheelchair bound due to her condition. It was for this reason Claire had to spend a lot of her time tending to her sister. And this, coupled with the fact she felt Helen had always overshadowed her, Claire eventually snapped. And so it is. Late one night in February of that year, Claire waited until her parents went to bed. She would then grab a kitchen knife, enter her sister's bedroom, and proceed to take Helen's life in an extremely brutal fashion. It is said she then walked outside, posted her final TikTok, and waited for the cops to arrive. Claire's parents would only learn of this after being woken up to the sound of law enforcement and emergency services running through their home attempting to save Helen's life. In addition to this, the state of Pennsylvania has determined, although Claire was a minor at the time of this crime, she will be tried as an adult. And it is for this reason Claire has made our list of one story of how the internet came together to solve a crime. Back in 2018, an older gentleman arrives home from work only to discover that his wife is nowhere to be found. While this is not immediately alarming right off the bat, he begins doing a little looking around and discovers her bicycle is not in the garage where she leaves it. This, to him, is immediately alarming because you see, she goes on the same bike ride every single day and is usually home hours before he even gets in his car and begins to head home. So he grabs his keys, gets in his car, and heads back out. And as he's driving up and down the road along the route that she usually rides on, he would make a heartbreaking discovery. He sees his wife's bike completely mangled off the road in the grass, finding her deceased not too far away from there. The police are immediately notified, and as they begin performing their investigation, they would have very little to go off of. They would only find a piece of a car part, and they had no idea what it was or if it even came from the vehicle that hit this woman. Over the course of the next few weeks, the family is begging and pleading for whoever did this to just come forward, and one of the detectives takes a picture of this car part and posts it on a subreddit. Within the matter of a few days, you have all sorts of theories flowing into this thread when all of a sudden a man by the name of Jeff posts 1988 Chevy Silverado headlamp bezel. He posts a link to said car part, and it is a 100% match. Well, not too long after, the police would end up getting a tip about a 1988 Chevrolet K10 with damage on the front passenger side, and when they went up to the vehicle owner and began asking them questions, they immediately confessed to the crime. Now, the only reason that Jeff knew what this car part was is that he was a vehicle inspector for the state of Maryland for many years, and in that state you have to perform mandatory headlamp adjustments, and that is the only reason he knew what this car part was. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is just So a lot of you may have seen bits and pieces of this viral, heart-wrenching body cam footage out of Oklahoma. But I'm also fairly certain not a single one of these accounts actually explained to you what happened. Well, unfortunately, we got you covered. Everything you need to know about the viral body cam footage. Shortly before midnight on January 5th of 2023, a Tulsa mother of three awoke to the sound of her then 9-year-old son screaming. Now, initially, she was under the assumption the young boy was just having a nightmare. But as she gets a little closer in order to wake him up, she discovers he is in serious need of medical attention with multiple puncture wounds to his chest. And to make matters even worse, the attacker was found to be no other than his very own sister, just 3 years older than he. It was at this point emergency services were notified, bringing us up to speed with the beginning of the now infamous body cam footage. The still unnamed girl rushes downstairs in a state of hysteria, continuing to apologize for her actions over the course of the next 10 minutes. All the while,
I'm sorry, Dad. I'm sorry. I don't know what to ask. I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm sorry. Please. I'm so sorry.
she would also confess to the crime several times, while simultaneously stating she had absolutely no idea why or how this had happened. In addition to this, that she had ran back into her room after the attack in order to toss the knife out of her window, at which point she is placed into a squad car and taken in for holding.
Am I gonna be able to go back to school?
Huh?
Am I gonna be able to go back to school?
I don't know yet.
Now I'm sure at this point a lot of you are asking the exact same question. Why? Well, that's just it. No one really seems to know, and any source that claims they have the inside scoop is purely speculation. And unfortunately, in the early morning hours of January 6th, that young boy passed away. I leave you with this.
Sometimes juveniles are what's called a youthful offender, where they've committed a heinous crime, and even if they're under 18, they still get charged as an adult. In this case, the suspect is so young that that's not going to happen.
They inserted firecrackers into my private parts. My name is Junko Furuta. The biggest mistake that cost me my whole life was turning down a boy who likes me. He was a part of a gang. One day, when I was on the way home, I got kidnapped. Yes, that was him and his friends. They raped me repeatedly. As if that wasn't bad enough, at least 100 members of the Yakuza gang were invited over and took turns on me. After that, they found my address in my notebook. They said the gang will kill my family if I try to escape. They forced me to call my parents and told them I was safe and staying with some friends. I did it in hopes of a positive ending. But it's just the beginning of the torture. I was hung from the ceiling and used as a punching bag. They beat me with golf clubs and insert objects inside of me, including metal rod, burned light bulb, scissors, skewers, and even firecrackers. I begged them to just please let me die. They won't. When I need food and water to survive, then they forced me to eat cockroaches and my own urine. Did I try to escape? Yes, I did. One time, I got a chance and tried to call the police, but I was caught and punished. They burnt my eyelids with a cigarette lighter and stabbed sewing needles into my chest. I was covered in lighter fluid across my arms and legs, then set on fire. Unfortunately, I still survived. But not too long. My body gave up due to injuries and infected burns. The pain just never stopped until I died. My body was discovered in a concrete drum. All of them were arrested. In July 1990, only one of them was sentenced to 17 years in prison, and the others were from 4 to 9 years. They all are free at this time. Please share my story with everyone, so that we can be aware, to stay away from danger, and learn how to protect ourselves.
Worst things to happen on TikTok, episode 1. Lamo. Downright tragic in every way. So leading up to 2020, Lamo, a 30-year-old woman from Tibet, had accumulated about 200,000 followers on the platform. That being said, she lived a relatively simple life alongside her mother and her father on the family farm. And most of her content involved Lamo educating her viewers as to what life was like as a female farmer in that part of the world. In essence, every single time she was on that camera, there was always this really uplifting aura that just really seemed to resonate with her viewers alongside of the wholesome content she had been putting out, and you could tell they very much enjoyed this. Well, little did they know, Lamo had been going through hell for quite some time, in the form of an abusive ex-husband. See, back when Lamo was 18, she married a guy named Tang Lu, and somewhere along the way, after they had already had kids, Tang became extremely abusive towards Lamo. And for years, Lamo would turn to various organizations and law enforcement for help. However, time and time again, she would be denied. That is, till June of 2020. After years and years of going through this abuse, she is finally granted a divorce. However, Tang is to maintain custody of their children. It was at this point she moved back to the farm with her mom and dad. And immediately after this divorce, Tang starts showing up to the farm uninvited, threatening to end their children's lives if she doesn't get back together with him. And with every threat, Lamo would fill out a report, yet nothing would be done. And here's where things get a whole lot worse. One night in September of 2020, Lamo is live streaming to about 400 people. And at some point, a great deal of commotion can be heard off camera. And as Lamo turns around to try and figure out what's going on, you hear an extremely loud series of blood-curdling screams before the camera shuts off. They had just witnessed one of the most disturbing and heartbreaking incidents to ever occur on this platform. Tang had broken into her house with a can of gasoline, poured it all over Lamo, and just like that, Lamo would spend the next 2 weeks in the hospital fighting for her life before ultimately succumbing to her injuries. In addition to this, Lamo's story would cause immediate public and international outcry. People from all over the world would start using the hashtag LamoAct. This was mainly due to the fact that even though there were organizations put in place to assist women going through these issues, that system was simply not working. As a matter of fact, that same year Lamo was killed, over 900 women would go on to lose their lives at the hands of their very own husbands in China. Less than a few months later, Tang's death sentence would be carried out. Furthermore, the remnants of this case are still being felt to this day, going down as one of the absolute.
My friends in my dorm, everyone was getting ready to go out, just having a good time, and it was around 11 o'clock that we left the dorm. It was only maybe an hour that I was out with them, and I just decided that I didn't really want to be out anymore, so I decided to walk home. I got there before she did, and so I decided to sit down on a curb that was in a fire lane. It was a well-lit area, and there's cars driving by, there's people walking down the sidewalks. It was around midnight. This black sedan comes up and rolls down his window and says, "If I give you $100, will you put on these handcuffs?" He was in his mid-20s and had really, really, really long hair, like down in the middle of his back, and was just really grungy looking. And I, in my head, thought, "Freak? Like, what are you talking about?" And got up to walk away, but before I could even get up, he opened the door, had me at gunpoint, and was pulling me in across his seat into the passenger seat. Within seconds, he had duct tape covering my eyes, had handcuffed me behind my back, put my head down in between my legs, and handcuffed my feet together as well. All he said to me was, "You should have taken the money." I heard the tires pull onto a gravel driveway. As soon as the car stopped, he got out, and I could hear him walking around the front of the car. And immediately he was at my door, dragged me out. We were going down steps. I still couldn't see. I was still handcuffed behind my back. He started touching me and kissing me. And at that point I knew what was gonna happen. And he sexually assaulted me after that. When he was done, he left me sitting there. I heard him go all the way up the steps and then have a door shut. And I heard the sound of dogs walking around. I heard the sounds of chains being moved around. And I didn't know if they were for the dogs or what was to come of me. And he came back downstairs and he sexually assaulted me again and then dragged me over to this table where he laid me face down. I could hear him moving chains around next to me, and I could hear them above me too. At that point, he came over and put a ball gag in my mouth.
This is the very moment investigators uncover more than 900,000 images of David Fuller doing some downright despicable things with the deceased. And that's only scratching the surface when it comes to the now viral body cam footage and the disturbing backstory behind it. Strap in and get ready, because this one goes deep. So we gotta actually take things all the way back to June of 1987, when a woman named Wendy Nell was discovered deceased in her bedsit, having been savagely attacked the night before. In addition to this, the culprit had taken it upon himself to, let's just say, continue to assault Wendy after she had already passed. And although investigators followed up on several leads, including Wendy's boyfriend, there just simply wasn't enough evidence to even remotely link a single individual to this crime, especially due to the fact that this was before the time of CCTV and DNA. Well, shortly thereafter, a 20-year-old Caroline Pierce would be abducted from directly in front of her unit. And for 3 long weeks, there's not a single peep, no sightings, no tips called in, no nothing. That is until police receive a phone call about a woman deceased lying in a ditch about 40 miles away. Well, lo and behold, they find several similarities between the 2 murders, things like means and methods and other details we simply cannot mention here. These 2 instances would later become known as the bedsit murders, and although they found a boot print as well as a fingerprint of the perpetrator, nothing matched up in systems they had at the time. With nowhere else to look, the case would essentially run cold all the way up into 1999. DNA testing had become much more pertinent, but once again, after running it through the database, not a single match was found, and as time went on, the more it just seemed like this killer was absolutely gonna get away with it. But then it happened. Coming into 2019, even more advances in collecting DNA became available, allowing them to collect an additional sample from Caroline's tights worn on that fateful night. And this is where things begin to drastically pick up, in this case as well as several other cold cases that had essentially been given up on. They finally receive a partial match from the brother of David Fuller. They then began digging through the man's family tree, coming up with one individual in particular. You see, David had been convicted of a string of burglaries back in the 1970s, proving he was at least somewhat comfortable with trespassing into people's homes. Or so they had determined he had been living in the same county the murders had taken place at that time. Well, finally, on December 3rd of 2020, more than 30 years after these crimes had taken place, can police show up to his home and...
We're from Kent Police and we're investigating the murders of Wendy Nell and Caroline Pierce in 1987. As part of that investigation, you've been linked as a suspect, both geographically and forensically. Okay, if you listen to what my colleague's going to say to you.
All right, David, you're under arrest on suspicion of the murders of Wendy Nell and Caroline Pierce in 1987.
Just a short while later, when combing through David's belongings, they find over 34,000 physically printed photographs, including this one right here. And I shit you not, they zoom in on the sole of his shoe, finding a perfect match with the shoe print left on Wendy's shirt. And if you think that's bad, things are about to get taken to a whole new level. In a cupboard in Fuller's house, they find 4 hard drives. And upon viewing those hard drives, they were absolutely shocked at what they were seeing. I mean, some investigators even went on to say they have quite literally never seen anything that compares to what this guy had been doing. While working as a maintenance manager in 2 different hospitals, he had been sneaking into the morgue and filming himself abusing the recently deceased. As a matter of fact, further investigation would identify more than 100 victims. And on December 15th of 2021, Fuller was finally sentenced for not only the murders of Wendy and Caroline, but also these horrible things he had been doing in both of those hospitals. I leave you with this.
The court has heard of the impact on these families. When members of Kent Police's family engagement team visited to break the news, it was incomprehensible to them. How could their loved ones be so violated in a place which was meant to care for them and keep them in peace?
He's calling, he's calling.
Hi.
Hello.
I have a question I was kind of confused about.
Alright, what's the question?
Are you like my boyfriend or my dad?
Oh, we can make up our own little dynamic.
We have a new ACM who reached out to Abby on Omegle. We're calling him the Gray Man. His character is entirely gray from his Snapchat profile. He is only following children and is only followed by children.
I think it's very scary to know that there's men just hunting and looking for 12-year-olds.
I mean, if I was your dad, would it be upsetting at all? Getting
I think it is too risky to do a meet if we don't know who we're dealing with. He is sophisticated. This is a chess match. Get ready. He's driving. Tell him he's driving. There's a lot of risk here, but come hell or high water, we have to get him.
So a lot of you may have seen these viral bits and snippets about the Turpin family or the Turpin case. However, yet again, we are still seeing a lot of part 2s being held ransom for likes, with some creators not even bothering to follow up on anything they've shown you. Without any further ado, here's everything you need to know about the Turpin case. But I must warn you, this one is one of the more disturbing cases we have covered on this platform. With that in mind, your discretion is advised. One day back in January of 2018, shortly before 6 a.m., law enforcement out of Riverside County, California, receive a phone call from a then 17-year-old Jordan Turpin. It is in this call, Jordan explains the following. 1, she's just escaped from her family's home by jumping out a window. 2, that she was able to make this emergency call on an old deactivated cell phone. She, along with 12 of her siblings, have been held captive for years by their parents, David and Louise. 4, some of them are quite literally chained to their beds as she's making the call. And 5, the home is so filthy and so unsanitary it has become difficult to breathe. Not really knowing what to expect, it was at this time a deputy by the name of Anthony Kalachi took the call, capturing the now infamous body cam footage involving his conversation with Jordan, where...
Hi, what's going on?
Okay. I just ran away from home.
Okay.
I live in a family of 15.
Okay.
My 2 little sisters right now are chained up.
They're chained up?
Yes.
Where are they chained up at?
On their bed. Now, Mother didn't chain them up just to be mean. They're chained up because they stole Mother's food.
Uh-huh.
I've never been alone with a person, so this is very hard for me to talk.
Do you take any medication?
What's medication?
Medication?
Yeah, what's medication?
Do you take pills? Do you take pills?
Oh, I don't think I've ever taken a pill before.
You have pictures of your sisters chained up?
Yes, but they're in here. Okay. I don't have proof of everything, but I have proof that my sisters are chained up. And see how dirty she is? We are so filthy. We don't take baths. We don't.
How did your sisters get like this?
Okay.
Your parents chained them up?
Yes.
Well, her statement, in accordance with the photos on that cell phone, allowed them to perform a welfare check on her brothers and sisters. In other words, they had probable cause to enter that home and no warrant was needed to do so. Bringing us to the second of many viral clips still circulating the platform about this case.
Hi.
You guys have kids in the house?
Yes.
Okay, do you mind if we come in and just take a look, make sure everybody's safe and everything's okay?
Okay, what kind of call did you get?
Well, we got a call that there was a young female walking around saying that she came from a house over here. We were able to find out that this was a house. We just wanted to check and make sure everybody was okay.
Think she came from here?
That's what she said.
From inside this house?
I think so. Otherwise, we wouldn't be knocking on your door at Sunday.
Did she say her name?
I don't know. Did she say her name?
I don't know offhand, but we need to check.
We just need to check and make sure everybody's okay.
Once we get in, make sure everything's okay, we'll get out of here.
We have a lot where we're packing.
Okay,
We're getting
that's
ready
fine,
to
that's
move.
No worries.
So it's a mess in here, so...
Now, it doesn't exactly take a rocket scientist to see they've been stalling the entire time. Well, turns out they had elected one of their children to start removing and hiding chains, but this was never done. The discovery that followed is what deemed this home the Turpin House of Horrors. Immediately upon entry, not only was it uncomfortably warm inside, they are hit with the overbearing stench of human waste in accordance with mounds and mounds of garbage just lying all over the place. I mean, we're talking couches, chairs, countertops, tables, the floor, just covered in trash. But
Well, a few officers begin clearing rooms while another attempts to distract the couple as much as he possibly can, thus giving a slight opportunity to speak to the children without their parents present. And before too long, they discover that yes, some of these children are in fact chained to their beds, having been deprived of nourishment, hygiene, and any sense of a normal childhood. Well, within just a short period of time, the officers have everything they need to place the couple under arrest. And you see, further investigation would find that things hadn't always been this way. As a matter of fact, prior to moving to their Paris, California home in 2014, it is said that it wasn't until then that this ultimately cold-hearted abuse truly began. It was around this time David and Louise began not allowing them food on a regular basis. They purchased toys that weren't allowed to be played with or even so much as touched, even going as far as to eat directly in front of them as a form of punishment. In addition to this, there was open and shut evidence of physical harm on each and every one of them. Some had been immobilized for such a long time, they quite literally could not walk on their own. And to truly put things into perspective for you, a 29-year-old within that home had only weighed 82 pounds at the time. Just over a month later, on February 22nd of 2019, David and Louise Turpin pleaded guilty to a total of 14 charges. 1 count of torture, 3 counts of willful child cruelty, 4 counts of false imprisonment, and 6 counts of cruelty to a dependent adult. Sentence, 25 years apiece. Now, it's with a heavy heart I must say things didn't exactly end there. It is also said that 6 of the 13 that had been held captive were then placed into the foster care system, and it was during this time period they were allegedly subjected to even more abuse. So why, you might ask, would any parent ever put their own children through these situations? Well, that's just it. While there are a slew of theories and speculation, none of them are truly agreed upon as the definitive reason. Lastly, I wouldn't be doing my due diligence if I didn't say, yes, some of the Turpin children are in fact on this platform. However, this is easily findable information with a quick Google search. Therefore, I will not be adding it in this video. That being said, friends and frenemies alike, we will see you on the next one.